Well, good afternoon. Steve here from Vitech Mortgage Group. Many of you remember me as Steve from Western Foothill Mortgage, and so it's just Steve. I'm not representing the opinions of Vitech Mortgage or anyone else. The information I gave you in the report, which you hopefully have in front of you to look at while you're going through this, is my information, and I do, of course, welcome comments, and I have received several comments, which I'll go over towards the end of this talk, since putting out my forecast. As you know, I do this annually. And this year, I think we've seen some dynamic changes, and yet I will refer back, as you know, to my 2010 forecast, because many things that I put out in that forecast have pretty much borne to be still apropos in this market. We haven't had a lot of changes in several of those markets. One of the changes we saw, which was a bit of a surprise as we entered into the late summer of this year, was that we thought that prices were going to begin to hold. We really didn't think we'd see the drop in prices, and although we did get a 7.4% drop in home prices, that's the lowest it's been, because that followed an 18%, which prior to that was a 15%, and so it's less bad, but it's still a drop. And into the summer, August or so, our prices on average were holding, and then we kind of tanked in the last 4 months out of the year. Not a lot of reason behind that. Interest rates have held, programs have held. We know we all got a boost from the great tax credits that were out there, but those ended in April. Those loans were pretty much closed by June, and we were still holding strong till August. On the other hand, home sales at 170 units per month average for this last year are up. They're up substantially from where they were in their lows. In the middle of 2008, we were only putting out about 105 to 116 home sales per month. And when you consider 170 home sales against about 1,100 average inventory, it puts us out where we're sitting at a fairly strong 6-month inventory. And the oddity in that is that that includes homes that are in 30-month inventories, like homes that are $1 million and up. Now, there's less of them, of course. But the real action is happening under $400,000, as we know. It's entry-level buyers. It is generally also being led heavier by the bank-controlled transactions than the rest of the market. For instance, on our overall market in the county this last year, we were just about 50% independent and 50% bank-controlled. Bank-controlled would be either a short sale or an REO. And that's not substantially better than before. But here's the oddity. We have 75% of our sales going on in the under $400,000 sales price, 93% in under $600,000. In the $400,000 price range, we have more bank-controlled transactions. They're taking about 62% of our transactions as opposed to 50%. So we know that that's where the action is. Certainly first-time home buyers are the most likely buying suspects, because we don't really have any move-up buyers in this market. Although I would take to task some of these move-up buyers should strongly consider doing that. But we'll get back into that. But in this market, we're looking at a case where we've seen continued tightening underwriting in the face of the government and the industry saying, gee, we need to make it easier for home buyers. So in some cases, like in credit scores, we're seeing it tighter and tighter for people to be able to qualify for loans. And yet, we still have 100% financing for USDA, VA, FHA 3.5% to a $580,000 purchase price. And these don't necessarily have to be first-time home buyers either. So there's plenty of good financing for those who qualify, and that has helped this market. Let's talk a little bit about the ominous shadow inventory that's out there. This will be the 4th year that I've had to bring up this, or probably the 3rd year, I've had to bring up the subject of shadow inventory. And that definition of shadow gets moved around from time to time. The current, if there is really a legal definition, which there isn't, it's just a term that was coined by RealtyTrack, it's anything from 60 days in default to already bank-owned. That's a wide spectrum. As you may know, the average date in California, the time frame in California, between the day that a house goes into its first notice of default, or for delinquency, to trustee sale is 367 days, over a year. Now that's due to inefficiencies, it's due to attempts at modifications, at temporary modifications to be followed by permanent modifications, short sale attempts, and all kinds of reasons why we're going out that extra period of time. But it's woeful that we have to wait that long, and so people say, well, you know, the banks must be sitting on a lot of inventory. I've never seen any tangible proof of that, and I've always asked people to give me information. In fact, an agent recently did, I believe it's a RE/MAX agent, and mentioned that Fannie Mae was indicating that they are presently sitting on, no definition of sitting on, but they're sitting on 260,000 homes. That may sound big, but when you consider there's 80 million homeowners in the United States, and Fannie Mae is a national organization, and probably has the largest portion of of the foreclosures of anyone, at least certainly in the prime marketplace, then it doesn't add up to much when you start breaking it down and you say, well, 10% of those are in California. How many of those would be sat on in El Dorado County? Maybe 13 or 14 actually on the west slope, the area we serve. So as you water these numbers down, and here's the other thing. I went in after talking to that agent and I pulled up Fannie Mae statistics off HomePath. Pulled up the 10 most recent listings that went into HomePath, which are Fannie Mae owned homes. Looked at the day they went active, looked at the day, went back to the records and pulled up their trustees' sales, so I know the date that they took them back by trustees' deed. On average, those 10 homes were on the market in 35 days from the day Fannie Mae took them back. So while there may be instances of it, you're certainly not seeing it in our market, so I don't know why you'd see it in other markets either. Maybe in LA because there's so many, maybe in some blighted areas they don't know what to do. I even went into banks, went to Bank of America and pulled up stuff they'd taken back to see how long they were taking. They were about 40 days typically, although they also had some that they were on for like 7 months. Nothing special about that house. I'm assuming there was litigation or something involved in it because I have no way to know. So I'm just not seeing the shadow inventory that's out there. And then we hear, well, gosh, with all the unemployment, it can only get worse. You have to think about the relationship between employment and home buying. We have 5% unemployment generally in this nation. We all know that's what's called stable employment. 5% are looking for work. 95% are working, and they're the ones that buy homes. So if we go to 13% unemployment, like we have in our area, or maybe more, certainly with underemployment, we're still looking at the other people, the other 87%, some of whom are home buyers, and they don't care that their neighbor's unemployed. They have the job, and they can buy a home. So there is no direct relationship whatsoever between unemployment, unless it gets ridiculously high, as in the Great Depression, and the ability to buy a home. Because if one guy's got a job, he can go buy a home, right? So keep that in mind when you look at the unemployment. Now, certainly we'd have more sales if we had more employment. But knowing that we're sitting at this 6-month inventory, now here's something else that becomes quite odd to us, is this. The inventory in the under 400,000 price range is actually sitting at 5 months. And in my survey of agents recently, I asked you all, there are roughly 1,100 homes for sale. But you've all been commenting to me that, yeah, but some of those really aren't for sale, for whatever reason. They're overpriced, they're not habitable, or they're far out, or whatever it is. And on average, you came back to me and said you think about 65% of those are really inventory that could potentially get an escrow, right? They could close, they could have a transaction. So if you take 67% of 5 months, you're under 4 months inventory. So here's the conundrum. In our most active market, we're in a 4-month inventory and we have falling prices. The prices in the under 400,000 last year went down 8.5%, where overall, including the markets where there's no action, only went down 7.5%. I would submit to you with this other final statistic that it's time to call an end to this. Here's the other statistic.